And hi, we're going to be looking at a presidential tier, and I'll be ranking presidents along a certain grade. It starts with the GOAT, greatest of all time. Then you have the super ones, and then a standard rating from A to F. A couple that I'm not going to probably rate at all is going to be Harrison, who only served for a month before he died. And probably will not include President Trump nor President Biden. Um, it's not that I'm not afraid to rate them. It's that it's too close to their time in office, and we really don't have an idea of how it will play out their presidency in the longer term. I think you really should wait at least 10 years or so, and we can include President Obama because his last term of office was 2016, but his first term started in 2008. And that's really when most of his legislation came into effect and his policies remained somewhat consistent in his second term. So I think that he's a fair game to evaluate. The criterion that I'm going to use is I'm going to look at a couple things. I'm going to really try and avoid my own personal biases and points of view. I mean, they're going to be there, obviously, because I'm rating them. But I'm going to more look at also like how we might view these presidencies in recent time, other than overall effect. Obviously, Lincoln is going to have a big effect because, he keeps the nation from falling in half, splitting in half. So that's a big effect. So it has to be a big effect, but I'm not going to try to base them on today's criterion of certain things that might be more present, such as media presence and, some areas of personal behaviors, as long as they're not criminal. I want to look at the historical context of their presidency also to see how they compare to their contemporaries. How are they handling ongoing problems? How are they solving those things? I want to look at their decision-making process. And I'm not going to talk about Washington's career as, like, say, for example, a revolutionary general. It's a factor, but I'm not rating his presidency on that, or on John Adams, all his amazing achievements as a founding father, but not necessarily related to his presidency. One thing I want to look at is I want to look at kind of like in their time, and even today, are they a dealer of hope? Napoleon said that the leader is essentially a dealer in hope. And do we see in their decision making, in their processes, and in their decisions, are they offering hope to America and to the American people? So that's where I'm coming from. First, and what I'll be doing is I'll have probably a few. I'm going to try to limit to 3 or 4 in this superior. Like, these are just phenomenal. Maybe we've only had 46 presidents. You're not going to have that many. I think 2 or 3 are going to make that superior, and then I'm going to pick from those 3 as the GOAT, greatest of all time. And I might just do it as A's and move them up. We'll see. All right, so let's go first with Washington. Washington is definitely an A-tier president and would probably go up into that superior category. Lots of reasons why. He takes an undefined role and he really defines it well. Not only in his the executive, but how he worked with Congress, how he worked with the judiciary, and really how he works with his cabinet. What a cabinet he has! I mean, he has Knox as defense, and he has Jefferson as Secretary of State, Hamilton. This is an all-star cast, and the thing is, they're very different from each other. Hamilton and Jefferson could not be. When you have Hamilton is this big federalist, and Jefferson is much more Republican, wants the small government, more populist, you could say. And yet he manages to to make it work because he's a consensus builder. From all the historical records, he really listened well, and he had learned that in the Revolutionary War. One thing he does is he wants to keep the country neutral because we're young, and he does a good job under tremendous pressure in the French Revolution and also then what's happening with the turmoil in France and Europe. You know, he realizes that eventually we're going to need to reconcile fully with England. And actually, the Jay Treaty does a great deal of work with that, working out some of the problems that were in the Treaty of Paris. He was under great pressure to support the Bourbon monarchy at the start of the French Revolution because of uh, obviously France's support of our revolution. And then how was he going to deal with the Jacobins, et cetera? So this is a really tough issue and great pressure to overreact, but he maintains neutrality and really maintains neutrality, which the country needed. We could not afford to get involved in that in any strong way. His farewell address is a masterpiece. You should read it. It's very easy to access. The big thing I like about him, I'm going to give a negative. He does rely a lot on Hamilton, and he is not partisan, but he is favoring Hamilton a little bit more than others. But that might just be also how he worked out, his own thought processes. He puts down the Whiskey Rebellion. He does it strong. His biggest thing is, is that 2 times he could have taken over the reins of the country and never let go of it. And he actually didn't want to run for a second term. He didn't think it was necessarily a good idea, but the country just so overwhelmingly wanted him. And I think he really did it out of his thing of sacrifice. And the sadness is that, this man who had spent from 1775 to his death, he only has about a year left alive when he leaves office. But he steps down twice when the military would have installed him as ruler, and he could have just kept going. And he had the grace to let it go. And 2 other people you can mention that were in the same spot. Cromwell was offered to be king. He could have made himself king. His army would have made him king. He refuses it, but he becomes a tyrant. And Washington certainly was not a tyrant. The other one is Cincinnatus, and we have to rely on ancient sources for that. But you had the farmer from the Rome, and he comes to the aid of Rome in the earlier formation of Rome, not like the not the Julian age or anything like that. And he walks away from being dictator when he could have stayed because the army was behind him also. So he is legendary, and it's truly fortuitous that he was the father of the country, and he earned it. Okay, let's go next to Adams. John Adams, man, he did so many amazing things for this country, especially in the Continental Congress phase, the whole period leading up to the revolt. This guy he doesn't get enough props for it. He's a little stuffy, could be a little bit ostentatious. The presidency is not his best moment. He really has some weaknesses. The worst thing he does is the Alien and Sedition Act. It's not good. And a lot of people their lives are ruined. They're arrested. And it's really, really a bad bit of legislation and application of law. Now, to his credit, he also continues Washington's policies of keeping America neutral in the European wars against Britain, and also, not getting overly engaged in what's going on in France, which was hard, especially because Jefferson was putting a lot of pressure on him to do so. Jefferson, Secretary of State, really supported the French Revolution in its theory and the goals of it, but he manages to keep America out of that mess, and that was probably a good idea. We weren't able to. One of the things I like about Adams, and I'm an Army guy. All right, my background is I've been a teacher, an educator, and the K-12 system and higher education. I was a full professor in higher education. And as an Army guy, I have a bias towards the Army. So beware of a paratrooper with a PhD is what we say. He realizes that the Navy is the key to America's defense, and he is the father of the Navy. and he builds that Navy up, and he puts a large part of small budget, but a large part of it into the maintaining and the building of a Navy and the training of naval people. We had a really great history of seafaring. And because we are so far away, armies were not our primary concern, also because Washington had set the tone and Adams continued with neutrality toward foreign lands, that we kind of minded our own business, that a Navy was really important for us for trade and also to prevent anyone from elsewhere coming in and bothering us. So it was very good insight. But he was an elitist also, and he didn't connect really with the people, even in the way he, when giving the idea of how the president should be addressed, he was a very, I don't recall the exact words, but it was like your most magnanimous, citizen and stuff like that. And Washington said, "No, Mr. President will suit me fine." He's a one-term president, and though he does a couple of good things, that I'm going to give him a C. Maybe I'm being easy on him, and I might bring him to a D, because that Alien Sedition Act is really bad. Very much goes against a lot of constructs in the Bill of Rights, and that's going to be a problem. That sometimes, the executive branch constantly is going to be, or the legislative branch is, where do they line up with the Bill of Rights? Because that's the basis, and that's the only protection that the nation has. And unfortunately, in many ways, we are, even though the construct of the Declaration and the Constitution say that these rights are not necessary, they don't come from the state. They come from, an immaterial thing. They come from God or the Creator. The state has a way of forgetting that their job is to protect those rights, not grant them, and protect them and respect them. And more than one president and Congress have at times really infringed on the rights of the people. And they always do it in the same thing, the reason for national security, but a lot of times it's because they don't like what's going on with their policies. Okay, let's now go to Jefferson. Jefferson, for many years, was probably my favorite president, or in my top three. He slipped a little bit, but he's still top tier, and he's definitely an A, in my opinion. And I'll give you some reasons why. So we had some good, our first five presidents are awesome. They are really amazing. Yeah, and even Adams, again, he did a lot of good things. Although, again, the Alien Sedition Act. One cool thing about Jefferson is he's a Republican, and that means he's kind of the idea of the rights of the people and the growth of the nation through the people, not necessarily through federalism, the power of the state. And you're going to find that basically all the way up to like 1830, every president is going to be Jeffersonian. And he has a tremendous impact upon the tone of the country and how it's going to be governed. The only exception to that is Quincy Adams, who is very much like his father, very more federalist. And but Jefferson is just such a deep character, and he's flawed. Okay, we all know about the relationship that he had with his wife's half sister, who was a slave, and they had 6 children together. She was a slave. She was in charge of his chambers. They were together for a long-standing time. I don't know the nature of their relationship. I'm not going to investigate it, but I don't. And yeah, it would very obviously, it would exclude him today, but you have to look at the historical context back then. And I'm not at all justifying what was going on, but that's just the playing field. So let's go to what he accomplishes as a president. He wants more of a weaker federal government. He is aware that the federal government is the greatest threat to the people's rights. That's an interesting thing, and he's very much aware of that. And it's truly and he wants to make sure the Bill of Rights and the rights of the people and the government needs to stay away from. So he doesn't want an overly strong government. So he does become a little bit kind of more pro states' rights over federal rights. He says, the concept of a republic. The other thing, but some of the things says this, and this is great now, he wants this kind of weaker government, and then he makes a Louisiana Purchase. So he's flexible, because the Louisiana Purchase was probably beyond his authority as the president. But he sees the opportunity, and he says, we can triple the size of the nation at a bargain basement price. And it also gives us props with the French, which was something I think a motivator for him. He did struggle with it, because he kind of felt it was beyond the scope of his constitutional power, but he made the call, and it's absolutely the right call. We get the Louisiana Territory, and then he has the foresight to send Lewis and Clark to explore it, and not only just to explore it, but he wants to meet the people. And Jefferson always carried a notebook with him, and he would just write little interesting things and thoughts that he had and ideas. And he wanted Lewis and Clark to do so, so he made sure they did that, and it brought a treasure trove of all sorts of things, of cultural aspects, of the ecology. This is a really great moment in American history. He's against the standing army because he recognized that having a standing army, again, the problem with standing armies is, and I say this, and I was in the army, but if you look at your history, standing armies at some point, if they have nowhere to point their weapons at an enemy, a lot of times they point them in toward the citizenry. And that is a very dangerous power, of course, to a republic that has democracy. So he's against the standing army, but then again, he creates West Point, which of course is vital to the national security of the country. So he was able to kind of juxtapose these philosophical conflicts. You don't have a deeper thinker than Jefferson probably in the Oval Office. He is way up there. He is like super complex in his thinking. So now the Embargo Act, that could be kind of a negative thing, because it hurt our trade. He also had the Non-Intercourse Act. Those are things that different people can interpret differently. But boy, he is so solid on his impact. He's a pragmatist. He shifts on his view. He comes in as he wants these gentlemen farmers, and that's a little bit of his aristocracy, but he also sees the idea of these small farms of normal Americans, making this into an agrarian nation, where Hamilton, I think, would have everything be an industrial park. But he's also realizing that he does start shifting on that, on the aspect of this, this kind of agrarian view of America. He recognizes that other things has to think. One of the things that's very interesting, the policy that he had written about and really encouraged, was when they started meeting all these sovereign nations in the plains. And he says, we're going to have to be careful how we treat these people and respect the sovereignty, and yet somehow have them joined to the Republic, but without destroying them as a group. Obviously, that's not going to work. He did want the native people out there in his writings that Lewis and Clark had met to assimilate and become American, but he wanted to do it with a very gentle touch and realized it was going to take a while, because manifest destiny is already coming on the idea, and the greatness of this land is like, now we know how far it goes and we see what it is, and this will make us a great nation. So a little bit pragmatic. Again, these are thorny problems. How do you deal with people who are in your land when you want to have continuity, you want to have free intercourse and trade, you can't necessarily have something that is not going the way the nation's going in your midst. This is a problem. And it's a historical problem. It's not the United States is, every nation that is a nation today went through these internal problems with how they expand. So he also is, again, his policies are really paving the way for kind of a populist, but not a fringe populist, more of a measured, thoughtful populist within the construct of a republic. It's not runaway, my rights, my rights, my rights. It's really the idea of opportunity. He wants America to have opportunity for the people and not just the elite. And he recognizes the construct that America was in many ways an aristocracy. And he knew that in order to have tranquility, the people had to be. So he's a phenomenal president. And I think also it's going to, he wants that popular, normal person's right. In a lot of ways, he's a walking contradiction, but sometimes is that bad? You know, this means that when he saw a situation like the Louisiana Purchase, he realized that it was against his own philosophy because it was for the good of the nation. Can you imagine if this area was disputed? We would not be the America we are today. We'd be different. I'm not saying better or worse, but we'd be very different. So he obviously had a huge impact on the nation. Again, up through Jackson, Jeffersonian thought, with the exception of Quincy Adams, who was not really an effective president, is going to dominate this whole Jeffersonian through Jacksonian America view. And in many ways, you can see it today, especially where, I've been in West Virginia, this area of hard scrabble work, Oklahoma. This is the Jeffersonian republicanism probably offers these people, it strikes their dreams. And I think that was that was great. One thing he also did is he does engage in the Barbary War, which was important. It was really affecting our trade badly, ruining the reputation, lowering our reputation that we couldn't deal with the Barbary pirates. And he does handle that. So, it's not that he's afraid of taking assertive action. And he also pardons most of the victims of the Alien and Sedition Act, which I think was very appropriate. So he's up there in the A. We're going to do